Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast, presented by Strategic Treasurer, your source for interesting Treasury news, analysis, and insights in your car, at the gym, or wherever you decide to tune in.
Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast. This is Craig Jeffery. I'm the managing partner of Strategic Treasurer and your host today. I'm with Nicolas Garcia, who's the director of Treasury Technology at UPS. Welcome to the Treasury Update podcast, Nicolas.
Good afternoon, Craig, and pleasure to be on your podcast.
I know we've been on different webinars and talked at different times, so this is good to have this type of conversation. Our title today for the podcast is Adding Value Through Treasury Technology at UPS. And really what we're going to be exploring is applying the latest Treasury technology to solve existing problems. As everyone knows, there's significant challenges, problems, issues in every Treasury department, particularly because there's so much changing. And this is a process. It's not a single event. So that's really the part of our discussion today. Nicolas, maybe we could begin if you would give an elevator pitch or a short introduction to your role and career that brings you to this point at UPS so people know your background.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Director of Treasury Technology with UPS. I've been with UPS about a year and a half now. I'm responsible for setting the Treasury Technology strategy, supporting the global Treasury function at UPS. I'm responsible for supporting our existing systems, for implementing new systems and technology, also to ensure that the technologies we're using are really what's needed to support our Treasury-related processes. Before UPS, I spent 5.5 years as a consultant with PwC with their Treasury practice, worked with a couple dozen different corporates in the United States across industry. I worked with these clients to help them take their Treasury function to the next level.
So working with a number of companies as a consultant and then moving into UPS. I suspect most people know what UPS does, but I was also wondering if you could give just a brief overview, maybe some interesting statistics, something that you find interesting about UPS's reach or scale that will help those who may not know some of these facts.
I think most people are familiar with the big brown trucks that deliver packages on a daily basis. We are the largest shipping company in the world, over 500,000 employees globally. We operate in over 60 countries. It's a fairly well-known company, but even to me, I didn't even know the scope and scale of the stuff we do. One of the things that I found most interesting is the way we've supported the whole COVID efforts in terms of helping, the various government agencies and healthcare providers, et cetera, just ship vaccines all over the world, and helping them with, all these supply chain constraints that are still present. But UPS have been at the center of that, and we literally help the world move.
Yeah, I've heard, the medical shipping, really, really important for the health of the country and the world. Let's move on to the strategic view of Treasury and technology. We had some discussion about this in preparation for today's talk. I'd love it if you could describe how you think about how Treasury adds value to the organization with a particular focus on tech.
You can think about the value that Treasury provides at various levels, right? So I think, when you first think about Treasury, it's about managing bank accounts, it's funding them, it's making sure you can, make payroll. And so it's very transactional. It's in some ways operational, and that's absolutely necessary for any company. You need a Treasury function. But I think the key question is, how can you take that to the next level and make Treasury a strategic asset to the business, right? And the way we think about it is we want to be the cash stewards, meaning we are the voice at UPS that's always thinking in terms of cash. Everybody knows cash is important, But I think Treasury is especially well suited to talk about that and really bring insights into how to maximize your cash flow. Everybody wants to maximize their cash flow, but in reality, that's hard to do. But Treasury, has the visibility into all the ins and outs, especially suited to look at working capital from a more strategic lens, especially suited to analyze how, your different projects or investments across your organization really return cash to the business. And so in order to do that, well, you need data and you need expertise. And for both of those, you need technology. For a company like UPS, we have over 1,000 bank accounts. You cannot do this manually, right? So technology is at the center of what we're trying to achieve, or where we see our mandate points to. Bringing the right technologies and ensuring that people can leverage those technologies in a meaningful way is really key to the finance function, but also to the organization as a whole.
As you talked about the breadth and scope of what's going on and what needs to be done, getting this done, there's an element of it's done by Treasury by itself, working, let's say, connecting to those 1,000 bank accounts, however many dozens of banks or 100 banks across the globe. Any other elements there when you think about it from either a technology standpoint, a partnership standpoint? Is there anything else that's important here?
Yes, definitely. So I think Treasury functions, they're all built differently, but there are definitely some common elements where technology can really be of great use. So we have a treasury management system. In my experience, it's the core of your technology footprint, right? But then you have ancillary systems that are more, fit for purpose and that specialize in certain aspects that enhances your TMS or your treasury management system, and it allows you to really, take full advantage of automation and advanced analytics. We manage our bank connections, our core cash, funding, cash pooling, debt investments. We have a TMS that does that. But then for certain more advanced needs, we tap into many other technologies, and there's a lot out there, but there's technologies that focus on trading. There are technologies that focus on particular FX exposures. There are technologies that help you with just accounting. There are technologies that help you with bank account management and so forth, right? So it's kind of expansive. It depends on, I think of, what are the type of activities that, fall under, the Treasury purview. But ultimately, the way, I think about it is let's focus on automation. One key thing to, onboard any technology is it really helping me automate end-to-end processes? And is it actually helping me be more efficient at that? It's not very useful if you automate only 10% of your process and you can say, well, Treasury is doing great, but then there are a ton of hands of two other areas in the organization, right? So we'll look at it as, okay, let's look at the end-to-end of this and let's look at how technology can help us. That's one component, automation. The second point is control and just the management of just risk or operational risk. And technology is also great at just reducing the amount of handoffs, reducing the amount of time people spend just keying things into spreadsheets or reading documents of things of that nature. So, we take a look at that and say, okay, are there processes where mistakes are common or frequent? Let's go for those. So that's a key other aspect. And I'd say the third component is around data, reporting and analytics, right? And it's okay, we have all this data, but it's probably distributed, across multiple systems, not very well integrated and very hard to make sense of, right? And so the other, I'd say, pillar of why technology or why certain technologies over others is, does it really help us, make sense of our data, use it in a meaningful way, and do something with it, right? In today's world, the amount of data is not a problem. The problem is what are you with it, right? How did you create value out of it? And so we're trying to be smarter about, how we leverage that.
The way you look at it, it sounds like there's a process orientation, and you described it as end to end as opposed to a component. And the other was data reporting analytics. How do we access the information that's needed and analyze it? Those are two, I guess, lenses that you look through as part of your evaluation and support of the company. Is that accurate, or?
That's right. That's right. I think that's a good framework. Taking care of the basics, actually doing the work. And then the next step to that is, well, now that we have all of this kind of sitting there, let's create value out of that, right? And let's make sure we're getting the right insights into the right hands.
Yeah, there's probably ultimately more value out of the data, but it's extremely valuable to manage the processes well. In terms of a digital strategy, because I do want to get to some of the examples and initiatives that you've worked on or are working on. I think those are going to be quite fascinating for everyone who's listening. But when you think about a digital strategy, a technology strategy, is there anything else there? I know we talked about how do we decide what the flow is. Anything else before we move into some of these initiatives?
Yeah, I would say maybe a couple of additional things on how we think about this is, one, it still needs to fit into the overall, let's say, corporate strategy or even corporate IT strategy. So, we don't operate in a silo. Every time let's say we want to buy a new technology, tactically we have to go through the approvals and the budgeting and all of those kind of things. But it's important that it aligns with what the IT organization and what your strategy organization actually wants to do, right? So, we're mindful that we don't act alone, and there needs to be alignment. And so some of the tools we use in Treasury are actually tools that are being used in other areas of UPS. And now it's our job to take the value out of those tools for our specific use cases, but leveraging what's already there, right? We don't want to reinvent the wheel.
What might be some examples of this? Is like a common tool set or data store? Or
so we use Google Cloud, for example, for what we're building in terms of a Treasury type data lake. Treasury is not the only one at UPS using Google Cloud. There are other functions that are leveraging Google Cloud in other ways. So what we do is, well, we're not only using the tool, right, itself, but there are a lot of opportunities to learn and share experiences. And so, I might be doing something and maybe I'm stuck with, maybe I'm not sure how to implement something specifically. Well, I know that down the hall, there's the marketing team, to just give you an example, that's also doing amazing things, Google Cloud, totally different data sets, but they have capabilities, they have expertise, they have people that can help us out, right? And so, at the end of the day, it's also about people, right? So you can only produce what you're capable of, and the expertise that exists is limited, but part of the let's say the beauty of working at UPS is that we're a big enough organization that if I have a question, I can probably reach out to somebody to get a little help, right? So let's leverage the technology. Let's not pay double fees, but it's also let's leverage all the knowledge that exists and let's make the best use of that.
Great, that's a core area, and I think I cut you off before you started or as you were starting the next area.
Yeah, the last thing I was going to say was we're in an environment where, every investment, so to speak, needs to be explained, right? And so, we try to create, solid business cases every time we, buy a new technology or launch a new initiative. And we ensure that there's a return on investment, right? And that is not easy to do. In many cases, the benefits are not green dollars. They come in many forms, and they are in many cases kind of long-term. And so you have to make some assumptions, but we try to be very careful about, ensuring that we're actually getting, bang for our buck. And we have a couple frameworks that we use that we kind of refine, but we are careful about, how we spend our money.
Yeah, excellent. I guess another aspect of stewardship, right? Your investment decisions on tech. I'm really looking forward to talking about some of the initiatives you have. Some of these might be brief or longer, but why don't we start with the payments and payment factories? Maybe you can talk about your initiative there and what you've learned or are learning.
Yeah, a key initiative for me, currently working on an implementation of a payment hub. Our current setup is that everybody that needs connectivity to banks, not even just for payments, but also kind of for receiving statements, is very decentralized. So, Treasury has specific needs, but we're not the only ones that need interaction with the banks. For payments, we have the AP function, and we have various shared service centers that are constantly initiating payments for various reasons. We've got payroll, we have other areas that execute payments. And then for receiving statements, again, not just Treasury, but we have accounting, our ERP leverages those for reconciliations, et cetera. So, there's a big need for streamlined connectivity with banks. And so our approach is, we've got to centralize this. We can't have everybody kind of managing this separately. So let's put something that can be leveraged by the whole enterprise, that is more sustainable, but also that gives us higher visibility into all our payments. And so, one of the things I said at the beginning was, one of the things we think about a lot is, we want to be cash stewards. We really want to have visibility into all working capital related stuff. And part of that is payments, right? And so we really want to see, we want to see all our payments, right? We want to see every wire we're making. We want to understand every transaction that's going out the door. I mean, could we improve the terms in which we're paying? Are we paying too much in fees? Are we doing too much cross-currency transactions? Are we just using too many wires? And maybe some of those should be ACH type payments, et cetera, right? So it is about visibility. It is about control. And so the rationale and the business case for this payment hub initiative is, we want to take ownership of that. We want to make sure it's really centralized, because we want to give Treasury the tools to really manage that process.
Sounds like it would be great to do a check-in again, maybe 6 months or 12 months as you go through the process to see what you've learned as you're retooling your payment factories and information aggregation. We spoke about reporting, and data lakes is a big term that people use. Not everyone in Treasury knows what that means, but everyone understands analytics quite well. Maybe you can talk about what you're doing from a reporting standpoint. I'm going to be listening and probably asking about reporting that might be more focused on operational needs and activities, and those types of reporting and analysis that might be more strategic or analytically oriented. So what are you doing here? What's your initiative?
We're setting a Treasury data lake, right? And so what that means for us is, current state, we have a number of systems, right? The TMS is one of those, but we have several others, and they all have certain data. Some of these systems are better at reporting than others. But the truth is, it's very hard in some instances for certain users to have visibility into a consolidated set of the data that's consistent across these systems, and then have that in a way that's easy to report on. What we're trying to do is we want to consolidate the information from these various sources. We want to reconcile that information because we don't want discrepancies that would only, create confusion. And we want to bring that into a data lake, kind of massage that, aggregate the data in such a way that's organized, that's labeled, that there are no empty records or things like that. And then on top of that, layer in a reporting tool. Nowadays, there are just so many, good systems out there. We use Data Studio, but we've also kind of explored Power BI. There's a Tableau. There's so many, right? And so these reporting tools kind of sit on top the data lake and allow us to create dashboards and really very cool and interactive dashboards and reports. And you can give this to, not just Treasury people, but even outside Treasury, with a few clicks, a few kind of drag and drops type of functionality, things like that. You really get access to the core data, to the insightful stuff, and it really empowers people to make decisions. And it just improves the way people have access to the data. You don't have to wait, a day or two till somebody produces a report. By then it's too old or whatever, or maybe they give you the information, but it's on a spreadsheet that God knows who created it. But the idea is to make this as user-friendly as possible. As I mentioned before, we're using Google Cloud to kind of build this data lake. I'd say we're, at the early stages to put something like that together, but some aspects of it are already live, and we're really excited to be able to provide these tools to a broader set of users.
So a question on that. So you described it as a Treasury data lake. Treasury, has quite a bit of information on its own in multiple systems, and a global organization like yours has quite a bit there. Is this Treasury only, or does this also tap into other areas of finance, other areas that may provide information for forecasting, working capital needs, requirements, growth? Is that a potential future? How is it? How do you draw the walls around, or the shoreline of a data lake, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And so right now is mostly Treasury specific. I would say 90% Treasury specific, because we are focusing right now on the operational part of Treasury, right? So, we want to make sure people understand, cash balances, et cetera, et cetera. Our vision is to bring information outside Treasury as well. We've already started working on that. There are some enterprise initiatives already underway at UPS that are somewhat higher level of what we're doing. So we are already building those data lakes that are more cross-functional. And so from that perspective, Treasury is going to become more of an input to that, let's say, more enterprise data lake vision, right? And so that's where we see in a couple months, maybe a couple years, where everything would integrate. But not everybody's going to care about all the granular, detailed Treasury data. And so kind of in parallel, we're building our own Treasury-specific data lake that can really make use of the vast amounts of data that we use on a constant basis. And so I think, it is a combination. We are building this, let's say, one step at a time, but our full vision is to have a full-blown data lake with all the relevant data kind of integrated and fully reconciled and available to the whole enterprise.
Yeah, excellent. So I think that's another concept to think about, right? Everyone talks about a data lake, but there's oftentimes multiple data lakes as these grow. And it sounds like you're starting off more on the operational side of that information and then expanding to more and more strategic, longer term vision. Am I capturing that right?
That's exactly it.
And that mirrors so much what organizations have, from a reporting basis. Reporting was almost always operational, and then anything that had to be done a strategic basis, a planning basis. People are running things more ad hoc, not necessarily in rigorous systems. The reporting was much more manual. And so we see that too taking place in the data lakes, the ability to manage this type of reporting and analytics. We build, we grow, and then start to leverage that data. Excellent example and discussion there. Robotic process automation, or RPA, is another area that you've been working on. Didn't know if you had a ability to give us a quick thumbnail sketch of what do you use that for? How is that working? How does that fit into not only your overall strategy, but where are you leveraging that most heavily in Treasury?
A year ago, or a little bit over that, we started looking at our processes, right, and realized that a lot of these processes, were just very intensive in terms of manual effort, relied on spreadsheets a lot, required a lot of handoffs. and were very prone to error, and they would just take time to execute. And then, when you kind of add up all the hours spent in executing those processes, you realize, geez, this is a very expensive process. And, this person, that's an amazing accountant or, expert on trading, and I have them just playing around with spreadsheets. There's got to be a better way to do it. We started kind of outlining, okay, what are these processes that are just not efficient enough? What comes out of that review is that there are a lot of steps that are involved that are just very repetitive, that are also very rule-based, right? I mean, there's not a lot of, let's say, human judgment required in order to execute. And so we started exploring, tools out there to help solve this problem. And so came up with RPA. We use UiPath, but there are other tools out there that are great. And they really help in automating those processes that are repetitive and rule-based, right? And it really allows people to just basically stop doing that. In reality, it's very hard to remove entirely people from the processes because you still want to maintain a decent amount of control and oversight, as well as even just for kind of backup purposes. You want to make sure that people, don't forget what the process is about. But the truth is, a lot of things can be done by these robots. We looked at these processes. In many instances, we discovered that the processes themselves were kind of wonky. So we went kind of back to the drawing board and, okay, let's think about how this process actually needs to work. And with a few tweaks, with a few kind of decisions in terms of redesign, we come up with more streamlined processes with sections of them that are prone for automation. And so that's where we layer in RPA. For example, processes that require every day banks are sending me X number of reports to my email, and literally all I need to do is download those reports out of my inbox and type that into a spreadsheet. Well, that takes an hour every day. A bot can do that in like 5 minutes or less. Those type of activities that are very rule-based and very sequential are very easy to automate. Basically, processes where there are a lot of handoffs of files that need to be moved from one system to another or to one database to another and perform certain checks or controls over those. Those are pieces of the process that are somewhat easy to automate and that really save a lot of time. So it's been a journey. Again, we've only started working on these initiatives recently. I do think that we need to work more on rethinking the processes end to end. But once that work's been done and there's a good understanding and we feel good about how the process actually worked, we've realized that there are just a lot of opportunities to embed RPA. We're currently saving, a good number of hours for our people on a daily basis. And while there's more work to do, we're really excited about the potential of this technology.
I have a couple quick follow-up questions on that. So who's building the bots? Is that someone in Treasury, or is that another area that you're working with? Someone in Treasury is working with someone else to develop those?
Yeah, so that'll be in-house. So, we kind of have a couple guys that got certified on UiPath recently. The tool is surprisingly easy to use. There is a learning curve, but people can learn to use it relatively quickly and get on building bots. So we're doing this internally at Treasury. We still need to comply with some policies and some parameters out there to ensure that everything's under control, but we're building the bots ourselves.
Yeah. So another question. So when we think about your point about understand the entire process and using something like a bot versus perhaps a system that integrates the process, has pre-formatted pathways, how do you distinguish between let's call it a more fully automated approach and the use of bots. How do you make the cutover to say we want to put this in a business process this way, or we want to use a bot to streamline this? Like, for example, those files from your emails, like you get these files, they download, they need the data. How do you determine, let's use a bot to get this done versus using SFTP or an API, or some other method of getting that data? How do you make that cutoff or that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think the answer is it depends on the use case, right? I think we'd have to evaluate each one separately. But in my experience, RPA is great when you're working cross systems and there's no good connectivity in between them. Let's say I have two systems and there's a great API that connects them both. Most likely, I would say that's not a good use case for RPA. Well, I'll just use the API and do what I have to do in one system. But when I have to jump system to system, and what it happens is that you have someone doing that manual manipulation of the information cross system, that's where RPA is so valuable because, you can always think of, okay, let me deploy an API, but that is actually more complex. You probably need more specialized IT people to do something like that. With UiPath, you don't need IT people. It takes like 3 weeks for a Treasury person to get certified. Yeah, they have to like technology and all these kind of things. They can't start from zero, but it takes only a few weeks to get certified in something like this. And these type of processes, like moving information from one place to the other, or just clicking on let's say a web browser, right? Like you open a web page, you click on 3 places and then download something, move that somewhere else. Well, I'm sure there are more sophisticated ways to automate that, but that's probably too much. That's probably bringing fighter jets to light up your grill. There are ways to do that much faster. And I really think RPA is better suited for those type of activities. The point you're bringing, I think it's very interesting, which is, well, how do you decide which technology to use? Applies for RPAs, but it applies in general. And it's, well, yeah, you have to have, good frameworks and good parameters and kind of rail guards to make sure that, you're really using the best possible technology for that particular problem, because or else you end up in a worse place that you started with. And then now you have to maintain all these random systems created by so many people. They break, nobody can, troubleshoot them. And that's probably worse at the end of the day. So there's got to be a framework. But I would say that, in our case, we're careful about where we deploy RPA, but I think we're happy where we are.
Good explanation. I don't think I've ever heard of the fighter jet lighting a grill, but that's a vivid image, right? I know people have used examples of like you don't need a laser to cut a tomato, right? It's like
That's right.
There's a million of these handoffs, and it's great to say future state will use APIs everywhere or streaming, streaming connectivity using Kafka or whatever. There's so much to be done, and it takes a while. And this is a great tool to move forward. So really good example. Thanks for letting me poke at some of those nuances, because it's good to be talking to tech experts. I know we wanted to talk about cash flow forecasting, but we're going to need to move to final thoughts. Any final thoughts or advice as people look to add value through Treasury technology at their organizations? Any key point that you would want to make sure that is left in their minds?
Sure. I think everybody's getting more tech savvy, digital, and that's just kind of a fancy term out there, but everybody's talking about it. There are just so many tools these days. Technology advances so quickly. And, it's hard to make sense of all that, And also, it's hard to keep up with the latest and greatest. It's hard. There are just so many amazing products out there that do so many amazing things. And then it's, well, how do you pick and choose? As a final thought, what I want to share is you need a strategy. You need to have some core statements around, what are those principles for deploying technology, right? What are those priority areas, right? How do you evaluate new technologies, et cetera? I think that's important. The second component is, well, you need people, and in my case, my role is very focused on technology, but I'd say that most of the best ideas don't come from people that are only doing technology. It's people in the business, working through multiple types of processes, and they are coming with great ideas, with creative approaches on how to do things. And I think that's what's important is ensure that the people you work with, they're all knowledgeable about technology. People are informed. People have a good understanding of what's out there, because I think that's helpful in ensuring people understand what's possible and then come back with ideas. And so, I see myself also as responsible for making sure that people stay somewhat up to date with what's going on, being able to share what's the latest in the Treasury technology landscape, and ensuring people that are aware of that. So it's not just kind of a Treasury technology kind of thing, but making sure that people understand what are some of the capabilities that exist. Finally, I'd say it's about having a mindset in which you're allowed to try things. Maybe some things don't work out perfectly. Having leaders that understand that, it takes time to build things. There's a little bit of trial and error, getting things to work perfectly. It's always challenging. That back and forth is acceptable. And in this world, thinking in terms, or a good way to think about it is kind of through the agile approach, in which you build small things and then kind of scale from that. It's a positive mindset to have, because it allows to keep moving forward, really bring new things to the table, and don't expect that one single technology is going to solve all your problems, but really thinking more incrementally, thinking about, innovation driven by multiple people as opposed to just the department head.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nicolas. Really appreciate your time.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Treasury Update podcast. Be sure to follow Strategic Treasurer on LinkedIn. Just search for Strategic Treasurer. This podcast is provided for informational purposes only, and statements made by Strategic Treasurer LLC on this podcast are not intended as legal, business, consulting, or tax advice. For more information, visit and bookmark strategictreasurer.com.